Right now, our very special guest, Sarah Posner, writer and author of God's Prophets, Faith, Fraud, and the Republican Crusade for Values Voters, and also wrote a really good article, Inside the Duggars, Deep Ties with a Once Powerful, Now Scorned Ministry. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So Josh Duggar was a big shot. He was with the Family Research Council, the lobby for right-wing Christians in D.C., and he also was on that 19 Kids and Counting. And he fell from grace. First, it was the revelation that he had sexually abused his sisters, and then after that he had some trysts with some strippers. So, and had the account on Ashley Madison as well. So this was a big fall from grace, but the original story about how he handled and was helped by counselors when after it was discovered he had sexually abused his sisters, that whole story is now just coming out, and you played a big part in this. Tell us about what happened with the Josh Duggar story in terms of his counseling.
Well, in 2002 and 2003, when he was about 14 or 15 years old, he admitted to his parents that he had inappropriately touched 4 of his younger sisters and another girl or young woman. And instead of seeking professional counseling for him or turning this matter over to law enforcement, the Duggars sent him to a training center that was run by a ministry called the Institute in Basic Life Principles. Mm-hmm. And the Duggars belonged to the Institute's homeschooling program, which is known as the Advanced Training Institute. And the Institute in Basic Life Principles basically teaches girls and women that to avoid being sexually assaulted, they have to dress modestly. They have to, if they are assaulted, they have to cry out to God. And if they don't cry out to God and they don't dress modestly, they're blamed for being sexually assaulted.
I just read an op-ed in the New York Times. It reminds me of what we see in some villages in India, where even if girls are raped, they are blamed for it.
Right, and so we don't know precisely what Josh Duggar was taught or counseled at this training center in Little Rock, Arkansas, but this is what this organization teaches. And I'll just give a little sort of breaking news side note to all of this, which really isn't a side note, it's really a part of the story.
Sarah, we love breaking news.
So I wrote about the inside of the Institute in Basic Life Principles, which is actually based right outside of Chicago.
In Oak Brook.
Near where you are. And I talked to a lot of women who had worked there or been interns there over the years who had been sexually harassed by the founder and president of the organization, who subsequently resigned after about 30 women had come forward with accusations of sexual harassment.
I didn't know Bill Cosby ran this. Oh,
Bill Gothard.
Oh, okay, another Bill, another bad Bill.
Yesterday, and I just found this out about an hour ago, 5 women have sued the Institute in Basic Life Principles and its board members, alleging that they did nothing about the sexual harassment and sexual abuse that they experienced at IVLP, didn't turn it over to law enforcement, swept it under the rug. And so the Institute is now being sued over this. The same institute, the same organization that provided the quote-unquote training to Josh Duggar after he had admitted he had sexually abused his sisters. And the other newsy piece of this is that the Freedom Caucus's favorite to kind of spoil Paul Ryan's run for speaker, Dan Webster, is also a member of this organization.
Wow, that's very interesting.
So there's a lot going on right now that has nothing to do with the Duggars, really, about the Institute in Basic Life Principles. So just this week.
So Daniel Webster, he's a believer and a member, or what's his connection?
So his connection, and I also wrote about this at Talking Points Memo, his connection is that in the 1980s he went to a training conference that the organization had in Michigan for legislators. And he has said that changed his life, and he and his wife subsequently joined the Advanced Training Institute, which is the homeschooling arm of IBLP. And his wife homeschooled all 6 of their children. He's spoken at their conferences before. His sons have worked for the organization, or at least one of his sons has worked for the organization. And one of the board members, this guy named Gil Bates, who also is friends with the Duggars and also has 19 kids and has a show on this smaller network than TLC called the Up Network.
They both have 9. I'm surprised one of them doesn't try to go for 20 just to kind of...
Well, I think they are going. I think this family is going for 20. It just hasn't happened.
It's a competition.
For them. But,
I think it's a competition.
But in any case, so Gil Bates.
That's easy. That's an easy, hard one to get. Yeah.
So his family has this show on the Up Network. He is one of the defendants in this lawsuit, and one of his daughters married one of Representative Webster's sons. So it's very kind of an interesting
love triangle or abuse triangle, more like it. So, if somebody like Webster's a member of this, what kind of views do they hold?
Well, the sorts of things that, they teach very specific things about gender relationships and gender roles. So the wife is supposed to be submissive to the husband. This was the issue that dogged Webster when he first ran for Congress in 2010 against Alan Grayson.
Sounds like the Southern Baptist Convention when they said women should submit graciously.
Well, it really comes from the same theological origin, but the IBLP teaching on this is a lot more severe than even the Southern Baptist teaching on it. And they teach all of the stuff that I just talked about with regard to victim blaming for rape. They have taught that their educational system is better than public schools and better than going to college. They've taught that rock music is demonic.
And I'm guessing they don't have a gay pride day.
They definitely do not have a gay pride day. They're opposed to contraception and abortion, typical things. But
evolution, they're probably for creationism, too, I would guess.
Yeah, it's hard to explain the depth and breadth of what they believe because it's kind of a totalizing ideology. It's not just that, they're religious conservatives who are against abortion and LGBT rights. It's that they have an entire worldview that's based on the teachings of Gothard that are encapsulated in what are called wisdom booklets, which is what is used for the homeschooling curriculum. And, it really is the sort of thing that completely isolates somebody from the outside world. So it's that you're supposed to follow the teachings in these wisdom booklets or in Bill Gothard's seminars and not pay attention to even other Christian teaching because it's not as pure as his.
Yeah, he sounds like the Christian version, I don't mean to trivialize it, but it sounds like the Christian version of the Taliban, very pure, hardcore, I know best, and everybody else is an infidel.
Well, that's a little...
Too far?
Well, it's just not a...
Not a parallel.
But because I don't find those comparisons useful, but, I think to just emphasize how extreme this organization is, it's people who have applied, obviously they've loosened this a little bit because some of their members are actually on TV themselves, but they have an application process to join the Advanced Training Institute, and some of the things that a family is asked when they fill out the application is whether they even own a television, because all of these outside influences are considered to be satanic, and so you wouldn't want to have any outside influence outside what is taught at the Institute.
Is it fair to call them a cult and Gothard the charismatic leader?
Well, let me put it this way. There were a lot of former members who I interviewed for my story who referred to it that way. He's definitely the charismatic founder of it. He founded it in the 1960s, and he managed to hold on to it until last year, when the pressure from the charges from more than 30 women over several decades that he had sexually harassed women finally became too much for them to keep him on.
Now, Daniel Webster is based in Florida, so this must have a widespread influence across the country, because he's not in Little Rock. So what is the influence, and how widespread are these beliefs, and are there any particular regions where it's strongest?
I think that they have followers from all over the country. They have facilities in 6 states, including Illinois. They've definitely lost members over the past, I would say, decade or so, because of how authoritarian it is, and because of Gothard's sort of extreme teachings, particularly on the sexual abuse issues. But nonetheless, followers of this very extreme ministry have been shown on television to be merely conservative Christians, like the Duggars and the Bates. Now, of course, TLC canceled the Duggar show after the sexual abuse by Josh of his sisters came to light, but it wasn't like it was hidden from public view that they belonged to this organization that was very extreme. It was only after these allegations came to light that TLC found it necessary to cancel the show.
Well, it seems, based upon where he went for counseling, that the sisters were still in danger the whole time. I can't imagine Gothard being very effective at counseling, given what we've learned.
You can't imagine that. It's true. Two of the sisters have said in an interview they did with Megyn Kelly on Fox that it didn't happen again, and that they forgave Josh. But, again, there's no way for any of us to know for sure what really went on.
Well, they couldn't have been too confident. They were putting locks on the doors of their own house.
It's true. It's true. That was one of the things they did when he came back.
So, switching gears, you're the author of God's Prophets, Faith, Fraud, and the Republican Crusade for Values Voters. Tell us about your book.
So my book, which came out in 2008, was about the Republican Party's unholy alliance with televangelists who preach the prosperity gospel. In other words, the gospel that, if you give the listener, the viewer, the follower, give me your money, you'll be blessed. God will bless you with riches in return. So it's very interesting that in the current primary, the candidate who's done the most reaching out to televangelists is Donald Trump.
Who's never read the Bible. He can't name a quote. He finally tried. He didn't exist. Speaking of the intertwining of Republicans and the religious right, there was in Plano, Texas, just this past weekend, there was at a big the Faith and Freedom Coalition. They had all the presidential nominees except Trump. And Carly Fiorina, she said, people of faith make better leaders. Ben Carson, we need to remind people that we have a Judeo-Christian foundation. And Mike Huckabee, of course, said that abortion is uncivilized savagery for which we must repent. So the religious right may not be, in my view, as powerful as a few years ago, but they still have a central role in the Republican Party as we get into this presidential race.
They have a central role in the Republican Party as we get into the presidential race, it's true. And also, I think that in the House Republican caucus, they're thought of as the Tea Party caucus, but really, there's a lot of crossover, and the religious right still does have a lot of influence within the Republican caucus in the House. And when you look at what the Freedom Caucus wants, they want Dan Webster as their speaker.
Well, I also think that one of the reasons they can't compromise is because they've turned even economic issues into religious theology, and so there's no compromising because they've made it about God. So I think that plays hand in hand. It's
true.
Thanks. I appreciate you joining the show today and shedding some light on this. Sarah Posner, writer and author of God's Prophets, Faith, Fraud, and the Republican Crusade for Values Voters. Have a great day.
Thank you, Wayne.
I'll be back in just one moment.
The Wayne Besen Show.